Hi, and welcome back to the Meaningful Money podcast. This is session number 597, and today I'm joined by my good friend, Dan Haylett. Now, Dan is a financial planner, he's a podcaster and an author, and I wanted to bring his new book to your attention. Honestly, if you are approaching retirement or if you're newly retired, you are going to want to read this book. It's a brilliant, brilliant piece of work. So I'm really delighted to talk to Dan about it. I'll let him introduce himself in just a bit, but if anything we talk about resonates, there's a bunch of links at the show notes, meaningfulmoney.tv/session597, meaningfulmoney.tv/session597. Here's my conversation with Dan. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Dan Haylett to the Meaningful Money podcast. I'll get Dan to introduce himself in just a second. But Dan, welcome, bud. How you doing?
Pete, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me on. Can't wait to have an amazing conversation. If it's anything like what we just did before we hit record, this is going to be good.
Yeah, no, I've been looking forward to it too, because look, I get sent a lot of books, all right, and I knew you before yours dropped through the door, so it sort of got to the top of the pile, and I tend to start with a healthy skepticism, but I devoured your book in 2 sittings. I think you've done an outstanding job, and it's not like anything else I've read on the subject, so it is, the retirement you didn't see coming, and looking forward to getting into that. But do you want to just give folks a sort of brief bio, who you are, what you're up to, and how you got to this point? I think is always interesting as well.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you. Coming from you, sir, who I've, who I've looked up to for years. That means a lot. So thank you. This feels like Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm Dan. Hi. I'm a recovering cricketer stroke golfer that never quite made it, that had to find a real job when I was about 21. When I realised I wasn't good enough to do that, I mean, very, very whistle-stop tour, I started work at M&G Investments. Okay. And so I started in the investment management world, worked my way through, went into sales, ended up in financial advisor or IFA sales, and then had a couple of other jobs within the asset management business, ultimately ending up legal and general investment management, out on the road, heading up the regional sales team, and for a good 15 years or so, wow, travelling the length and breadth of the country, speaking with financial advisors about their business and their investment proposition primarily. And so, that with that background, for probably the last 4 or 5 years before I made the jump, I really wanted to make the jump because I saw the wonderful work that real financial planners were having or were doing, and the real impact they were having on their clients. And actually, I say to people, and we might get into this, I say to people, I retired at age 36 from a pretty successful corporate career that had, financial and other rewards with it, but I had very little purpose. And I was waking up in the morning and I wasn't really kind of enjoying what I was doing, right? I didn't feel like it was really that meaningful. And so, I kind of had designs trying to fashion the opportunity to, jump the other side of the fence, become a financial planner. And the great thing for me, Pete, was traveling the length and breadth of the country. Before I jumped this side of the fence, I had a pretty good idea about what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, who I wanted to work with, what I felt was really important in dealing with people. And I think that gave me a really good background to then, to kind of get where I am now, really. And that journey from, becoming a financial planner to where I am now, I've always been fascinated by people. And I always knew that money was a very emotional subject, but until you are, like you and I do, sit across the table from these people and look at them, look at the whites in their eyes and hear their language and see their body language, very, very quickly it struck me that this is such a human thing, an emotional thing. And if I'm going to do a great job for them, I need to lean into that side of it as well as the number side.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. That was very succinct. It's like you've done it before, man.
A couple of times. That's probably the best I've ever done, so I'm getting better, to be honest with you.
Good. I imagine, obviously, as working with so many advisors, you really saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it was, I guess, a great way of really distilling what it was, what kind of a planner you want it to be.
Yeah, I sometimes say the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've reframed, so thank you for saying that. I definitely saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, and yeah, it absolutely helped me, as you said, really kind of frame who I wanted to be and the type of planner, the type of business I wanted to have, and ultimately the experience and the feelings I wanted the people I work with to experience and have. So yeah, it's still a work in progress, right? I mean, I'm learning stuff every day. Probably learn too much, and then it really has been a great grounding for me.
So now, financial planning, advising clients, what then possessed you to think, I know what I'll do. I'll write a book. What was the nudge that made you do that?
Yeah, the book, it's really interesting. Someone asked me, how long did it take you to write the book, for instance? And the short answer is 4 months. The long answer is 6 years. And so, really, I never set out. I mean, if you interviewed Dan Haylett's English teacher, they would say there's no way on earth that Dan would ever do anything that had any type of writing. But I started the podcast about 3 years ago and started having these conversations. I interviewed some clients on the podcast. We obviously now, due to wonderful meeting software, record and have transcripts of our meetings. So, and I'm some say quite prolific, but I post a lot on LinkedIn. My thoughts just get dumped out on LinkedIn. I started doing some sketching and inspired by people like Carl Richards and other people. Had my newsletter, and all of this stuff just started to point in one direction. It's like there's a whole host of stuff out there. Why not try and bring it all together in some succinct manner to write a book? And really, that book, I think a lot of the ideas all the ideas in the book really come from frustration and fascination, right? For years, when I first started, even though I knew that, that this is not all about the numbers, for years I helped and watched people plan brilliantly for the financial side of retirement, and then 6 months in fall off the emotional cliff, right? And I realised that, that I wasn't necessarily preparing people I was preparing people for the spreadsheet type thing, but not the psychology of it. And so we put all this work in to creating and, making the numbers all optimized and giving them or removing that financial fear. And, I'd meet them 6 months later and it was if that they should go back to work, if you know what I mean, because they didn't know what they were doing. And we'll get into all this in a second. So I wanted to write a book really that helped bridge that money and meaning piece, that helped people understand that retirement isn't an end game. And like you just said, and thank you for mentioning it, I've read a lot of retirement books, and I was tired of every retirement book showing kind of a couple walking hand in hand down the beach or creating that narrative, right? And focusing on the numbers, thinking that's going to keep people safe. But I wanted to write a book that had reality baked into the emotional journey of retirement. And so that's what I just wanted to get it out there, right? It's that, just get it out there and get people reading it. That was my main nudge.
Brilliant. I'm really glad you listened to the nudge. The subtitle is A Guide to the Human Side of Retirement Nobody Warns You About. And I love that. Retirement is a loaded word as well, as it means something different to everybody, and it often has a sort of negative connotation, which I imagine we might touch on. I wonder, I don't even know if this is a possible question to answer, but if you had to define what retirement is in a sentence or two, what would you say?
Yeah, thanks. It is an impossible question. I think there's a couple of things, actually. I think, I don't know, retirement, because retirement does have a negative connotation, I think people still see retirement as the end of something. I'm retiring from something. It's the end of something. And they just leave it there. And in fact, retirement isn't the end of something. It's the start of a whole new chapter that requires people to redesign their lives, their identity, and how you spend your time and money.
That's the soundbite.
Yeah. That's the bit,
sentence.
Right? It's kind of, redesign your life, your identity, and how you spend your time and money is really the most exciting part of this phase of life, but also I think the most psychologically challenging part. So if I had to define retirement, it is, I think, the point in your life where you have the ultimate freedom and choice of how you spend your time and your money. And that can be equally scary and exciting.
It can. You talk about the human side of retirement, and I wonder, just struggling to sort of frame the question. You and I live in a world, and our training is all towards the numbers, right? And the mechanics of retirement. And as you rightly say, that's the easy bit, and I use those words all the time. For the most part, particularly for people like you and I, we do this all day, every day. The money is the easy bit, but the real challenge is in the human side. So what do you mean by that? What are you seeing your clients face, the sort of things you're trying to address in the book?
Yeah, as you said, everyone focuses on pensions and tax and investment, and rightly so, right? I mean, it's a really important part, and if it wasn't important, you and I may not be sitting here.
Job.
It's a really, really important part. But I think the biggest risks in retirement aren't financial; they're psychological, right? And so, what I mean by the human side of retirement is that purpose, identity, relationships, structure, well-being, spending money, spending time, they're the things that make or break retirement. You and I have seen this numerous times. As I said at the start, you have people that that are financially free. They're completely financially independent, yet those things are the things that are getting in the way of them actually enjoying the fact that they've worked so hard to build up a pot of money and hit a number and all of that. So, the spreadsheets matter, but they don't give you purpose. They don't tell you what to do on a Tuesday morning at 9:47 when it's raining outside, right? I mean, they take away financial fear, but they don't necessarily allow you to kind of step into this phase of life with that purpose and identity. So, that human side of retirement for me is actually saying, what does it take to live a thriving life, right? And to me, the 5 pillars of a thriving retirement that I mention in the book, but actually you could take the word retirement off, Pete, and just call it life, right? I mean, I think the 5 pillars of a thriving life are purpose, identity, relationships, structure, and well-being. And those are the things that are human, they are emotional, they're messy, and they're the things that we have to transition as we come out of a career or our work into a new phase of life, because work and career and all of that stuff has given us a lot of those 5 things. And we end up potentially leaving them behind, losing them, missing some of them. And that's what I mean by the human side of retirement. We need to stop treating retirement as a maths problem to solve, like a complicated maths problem to solve, and start treating it like a complex human challenge to explore. That's how I would say that we need to stop that.
Love that. And it's endlessly explorable, isn't it? And I don't know about you, man, but that's why I get out of bed. If it was down to the money, it would bore me witless. I certainly wouldn't have stuck at this career for 28 years. So, no. But I'm endlessly fascinated by people and care about people. And when you see them sort of turn the corner and really understand what it's about and find this new identity, and we're going to come back to the pillars later on, it's properly satisfying, isn't it?
Oh, I mean, again, I wouldn't, if I had to work as a financial advisor that crunch numbers, I wouldn't be here. Like, it's just, again, that's, I think, they are the complicated solvable maths problems will be solved for everybody at the click of a button very shortly, right? I mean, these, and so, but this constant loop of complex human emotions and problems, connecting money with meaning and all of that stuff, and actually seeing the output of that, the impact of those conversations that we have with people and getting them to, give their money away or buy the thing or create the memory or do the thing is every reason why we get out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely right. I love it. Look, like all good books, there's a real thread and a real sort of journey through the book. And you start it off really the first sort of 10 chapters, and the chapters are short, very easily digestible. You could literally just do one at a time and kind of let it sink in, or you could binge. Your first 10 chapters are essentially retiring some illusions about retirement, which I think is a brilliant way to start, because, I mean, we see them all the time, and I'm sure you do too, the same recurring assumptions and illusions about retirement with everybody that walks through the door, or sends us an email at Meaningful Money or whatever. Now there's 10 of them. I'm obviously not going to ask you about them all, but do you want to just pick one and sort of unpack it a little bit for us?
Yeah. I'm going to chuck it back at you. I've got two that I really love.
Okay,
right?
that's fine.
Okay, I'm going to tell you the two, and then you tell me which one you think we want to get into.
Okay.
So the two for me that I think get spoken about a lot are the numbers will make you feel safe, or freedom is the ultimate outcome.
Oh, that's a difficult choice. I'm going to actually go with the first one. The numbers will make you feel safe, because I think there's a lot there.
Okay. So I think we've already touched on it a tiny bit. This is where, we spend decades building up, believing that if we hit a certain figure, like £1 million, 4% withdrawal rate, whatever these things are, we'll finally relax. Yeah, we get that kind of, we've hit the £1 million, that the safety is there. But that sense of safety never arrives, right?
Absolutely
Never arrives. The numbers can give us financial security, but they never give us emotional safety, right? And I've met huge amounts of people and worked with huge amounts of people like you who are financially fine, but still feel massively anxious.
Yeah.
And what they need isn't more spreadsheets. They don't need more numbers. They need confidence. They need clarity about what they're going to do with their time. And so the goal of retirement to me isn't to eliminate uncertainty, and it's to learn how to kind of live in it and understand it. And the problem with numbers, again, going back to the complicated issue, if we believe the numbers are going to make us safe, then we are trying to solve a maths problem. And quite simply, if we believe that having £1 million in our bank is going to make us safe, then that's why I think there's a byproduct of people struggling to spend their money, because their safety net anchor is on a figure. And if they go under it, if the markets have temporarily decline, they then have this real emotional issue around how they're living their life. So, yeah, I think it's a massive illusion. And the sketch in the book I've got is kind of the plan and the person rarely meet. It's kind of what the what the numbers say versus what retirement feels like. And those two circles don't overlap. They're not a Venn diagram. They're apart. And that's the thing to me. It's retirement is a feeling. Living in this phase of life is a feeling, and those numbers just don't make us feel safe when it gets down to the crux of it.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, in my sort of universe of things that I do, so there's all the free content on YouTube, and then there's the Academy, which is much more distilled and focused. And it's amazing how many people go through all that. They really skill themselves up. They run their numbers, and some of the plans that I see, non-financial professionals building for themselves are immaculately done, right? And they go through that and the numbers make sense. And sometimes, you and I would take a look and say, look, you've got 2.5 times more money than you need here. This is just so much fat in this plan. And yet they still want to come and speak to a human, which is why I've got every faith that, you and I will have jobs well into the age of AI. It'll be different jobs, though. Because it's just like I need somebody to unpack this for me, to talk to me, to kind of relate to me. And yes, reassure me about the numbers, but it's more than that. And I think people intrinsically, they know that. Even when the numbers just make all the sense, there's something that still, it's like, this is a hell of a button that I've got to press under my own steam. I need to talk to somebody about it, which is obviously a singular privilege that we get to do. Yeah.
Here's a quick real story for you. So I had 2 clients come in, a couple, 4 years ago. And he had one of the best binders I've ever seen. right? I mean, this, and if you knew him and his background, you'd know that he was reasonably well qualified to build this particular binder, right? So he'd gone onto planning software that you can get as a direct consumer or the public. It was all color coded. It was, the tabs were all in it, and he had, he'd done some Monte Carlo, which sounds way more fun than what it actually is, and done all that stuff. Yeah. And I remember going through this binder and looking at it, and I was thinking, gee, like a room of actuaries would stand up and applaud you, right? You've done amazingly well here. You've done probably as good as what I would ever think about doing. And I remember looking over at his wife, and his wife just wasn't engaged, and actually had some, looked worried. I remember stopping, and I just went, hold on a second, and let's call her Susan, because she might listen to this. Susan said, I said to her, Susan, how are you feeling about all of this? I said, because I can, I noticed that there's something, you kind of, body language isn't right. I didn't say those exact words.
Yeah.
And she said, Dan, I know the numbers are all saying we're fine. So why do I feel like I'm waiting for something to go wrong?
Oh, that's just, golden, isn't it?
And there it is, right? There it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's in a nutshell. That's it, isn't it?
And so, that was a big, big thing.
Amazing. So, you mentioned this a couple of times and I laughed. Because I think the day that people most fear when they retire is like the Monday morning after they finish. And it's like, okay, what do I do now? But that's not the most dangerous day in retirement, is it? According to you.
Yeah, I got asked this by someone who is very analytical on a podcast. So I was on the Retire with Style podcast with Wade Fowl and that.
Wow.
And
that's quite a coup, mate. Well done.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to drop anything in there, by the way. But obviously, Wade's a very analytical guy, and I said to Wade, "Listen, this isn't built in a spreadsheet. There's no research in this, by the way, right? So this is just a bit of a gut feel, but also there's real client work in this. But to me, the most dangerous day in retirement is what I call day 182. And day 182, for those that have quickly got their calculator out and having a look, is 6 months, I hope, there and thereabouts. Depends if we have a leap year or not. But day 182 isn't necessarily the day. It's a moment. And day 182 could be 6 months in, it could be 3 months in, it could be a year in, right? But to me, the most dangerous day in retirement typically is about 6 months in. And it's when the holiday feeling wears off and reality starts to bite. Like, you've done the holidays, you've fixed the shed, you've painted the house, you've done all this stuff, and suddenly you kind of realise that, like, is this it? It's kind of the day, I say this, and I've done this in a couple of presentations, it's the day where you open up the fridge because you're not looking for the ham or the Greek yogurt, you're kind of wondering what to do. You're looking for inspiration, right? And it's like... And I'm not sure what life looks like anymore. It's the day that structure disappears, identity hasn't formed during that messy middle, that unease and frustration stage. And so I think that's the most dangerous day. It's when, and for some people, it doesn't necessarily hit them like a brick wall either. It's like this slow creep. And all of a sudden they go, is this it? Is this what it's all about? And at that point, that's where either people buy a camper van or they sign up for something with a lanyard just to make them feel like important again, right? Because that's what a lot of people, or start a business that they didn't really want to start anyway. Or, I think, a lot of people think it's the day after, but actually it's when, because a lot of people will do things in the first 6 months. They will go out and do things and then realise that retirement isn't one big holiday. There's another 340 days that I've got to fill. And I've got to understand what, as I said, a 9:47 on a Tuesday morning looks like. That's what I've got to plan for.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned it again then, so I'm going to sort of come back to this. Identity. So these 5 pillars that you mentioned earlier on, you talk in the book obviously specifically about 5 pillars for a thriving retirement, but you're dead right, it applies to life in general. This one, identity, this is the one for me, the fact that we mentioned it 2 or 3 times already, taking on something with a lanyard, just to kind of be somebody, or... It's always kind of wound me up slightly when on a game show somebody will be introduced as a retired head teacher. It's like, okay, they're not working as that anymore, but that's the only identity they've got. They can't be identified as somebody having a great time blowing the kids' retirement, or whatever they're doing now, whatever their current identity is. It's always sort of hearkening back to what they were when they were working. But it's a big deal, right? How can people redefine their identity in retirement? I realise that's a just ridiculously huge question and a massive subject for a podcast episode, but I'd be interested to know how people can start to think about it and go about it.
Yeah. What's your average length of podcast episodes? 3 hours? Because are we good to go?
Like the 3.5.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure we'll finish it then. By the way,
no.
But listen, I think, Pete. I mean, you know, we'll see this all the time, right? I think identity is probably one of. If I had to pick one of the pillars, it would be either purpose or identity, depending on what day of the week it is, if that makes sense. But I think identity is probably the biggest. And actually, I think a modern life has led to huge amounts of people having an identity crisis, because we have for 30 years defined ourselves by our job title. If someone says, you meet someone for the first time and your first question hopefully is what's your name, and then your second question is what do you do, a bit like the game show thing, as you said, and we will answer that question with I am. And quite rightly, like you said, one of the worst things I hear is I used to be a, right? And so
sad.
It is, right? And you can't build or think forward. You can't go into, think or build a life if you're living on a past identity, if you can't let go of that. So identity isn't something you lose at retirement. It's something you need to consciously rebuild. And I kind of try and frame this is that your job title was a borrowed identity. It's kind of what you did, not who you are. And so I love Simon Sinek's work. I'm not going to question him in the slightest. But I actually don't think it start with why for people at this stage of life. I think it start with who. I think there's a layer down, because I think, if we can get creative and think of how we would introduce ourselves to someone by not defining ourselves by a job title, not defining ourselves by what we do, but who we are, then I think that helps in how we do this. I mean, I do an exercise with people where I get them to design a business card. So I will kind of say to them, what does your business card say? And it can be creative. It can be enjoying my time. I've got someone who trying to play the top 100 golf courses in England. I've got someone, nice. Someone who put and multiple certain things, trying to be the best granddad I can be. And you can have multiple identities, so multiple who's in this stage of life. And so. I think of it like updating your operating system, right? Your old one worked brilliantly for 40 years, but it's not fit for what comes next. So get creative. Don't identify yourself by what you do or what you did. Identify yourself by who you are and what you're going to try and achieve. And just be, it doesn't matter, right? No one's going to judge.
No, sure.
So, I think that's, to me, that's the biggest thing, because I do see people hanging on. Particularly, do you know who the worst are? Financial advisors.
Yeah, actually, having worked with a few, I can vouch for that.
No, because if you think about the career, right? If you're in a career that is deeply involved with other people and you care about those people, like doctors and people that do work like we do. I'm not saying we're doctors, but people that do work like we do. It's a really hard thing to let go of. A really hard thing to let go of. And so I think that this ability to transition, take the really good things that you love about who you are and what you do, and transition into something new is one of the most vital bits of human work that you will do as you transition into the second half of life.
Brilliant. Quite agree. You talk about retirement reinvention, and you put it on a curve, sort of the middle sort of portion of the book. And there's various steps on that curve, but 3 broad stages. But the thing that I enjoyed about that is that it just obliterates the idea that retirement is an event, which too many people still think of it as. We're working towards this point, and of course it's a lot more than that. But can you just go over the 3 stages of the curve and just unpack them briefly for us?
Yeah. And actually, it's really interesting because illusion 1 in the book is retirement is the goal, right? So I start,
that's true. Yeah.
you know, I start with that because I think that's probably one of the biggest things. And as you said, everyone thinks it's an endpoint. Now, I just want to say there's a couple of shout outs very, very quickly. The retirement reinvention curve was inspired by two things that I read and come across. So one, the Kubler-Ross change curve of grief, which is really interesting work that I don't know their first names, but Mrs. Kubler and Mrs. Ross, two ladies that looked at the emotional journey that people go through in the grieving process, you know, when you lose someone. And it kind of went through this curve of emotions, and the headings just struck me as the kind of conversations I have with people. And therefore, you know, this thought process that retirement is a massive time of loss and transition just started to kind of intertwine. And then I got to know Dr. Riley Moynes very well, and I had several conversations with him. He's a very famous TED talker in his 80s that talks about this kind of, you know, the retirement transition. And so they inspired it. So it's inspired this. So the retirement reinvention curve is kind of built around three broad stages that I call release, which is kind of a letting go of your old identity and routine. It's exciting, but disorientating. The second phase is rebuild, and that's what people define as like the messy middle, right? So this is experimenting, recalibrating, and rediscovering what gives your life meaning. And then the third phase is reignite, and that's when you've kind of built a new rhythm, you've found some purpose. Doesn't mean you found purpose, two very different things, and confidence, and you move from kind of maybe a survive retirement mentality to a flourishing in it mentality. And as you said, you know, we've been treating retirement like a cliff edge, and it's not. It's a messy curve, and that curve doesn't go in a linear fashion either. You know, you might be in rebuild for 6 months and back into release for another 2. And so, that kind of really inspired this emotional journey of retirement. And what I wanted to try and give people is not necessarily, as I said, this linear journey, but a language for them. So this kind of like, you know, if I feel a bit rubbish, then I might just be in, you know, rebuilding stuff. I might be back into experimenting and recalibrating, and that's okay to be in that as well. You know, I'm not failing at this. It's part of life's journey.
Yeah. I love that. You know, as I was reading the book, obviously I'm not retired yet, and despite the look of it, I'm nowhere near retiring. So despite the grey hair,
I've got no hair, so you know. I mean,
I should count my blessings.
Yeah, you should absolutely. I'd give anything for some grey hair.
But reading it, I'm thinking, okay, man, clients are coming to mind. People who I know are coming to mind. Like, God, that sums them up to a T. Exactly what they're at, what they're telling me. You know, what they're telling me about how they're feeling. And so I reckon that anybody reading this will, by giving them a language to understand how they're feeling, I think that's its power, Dan. I think that's what you've done so well. That's why I just devoured it, because I just think this is really going to help people identify where they're at. They're going to see themselves in this, and of course it's not just identification of where they're at, it's then what's next, how do we move forward. So that's it's singular power, I think. So it's a brilliant piece of work. Chapter 23 describes, I think you call it, the skill that nobody taught you, and that's spending in retirement. I always tell any client that comes across my door, this is really difficult, right? To transition from a lifetime of saving to the rest of your life of saving. I particularly like that you say that learning how to spend in retirement takes skill and courage. That's almost a sort of slightly jarring word initially. You think, what? Courage? But actually, it's exactly the right word. So how have you helped people learn this skill? It's a skill. You're dead right. How do they learn how to do that? It's the most difficult thing for me is to help people with this.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, I probably could have written a whole book on this, right? Yeah, I mean, and I've probably got enough content to think about that in the future. But yeah, listen, I think I call spending money and spending time, and we're focused on the money thing, but I call spending money and spending time the psychological battleground in retirement. And if you had I've got this sketch actually, the Venn diagram overlapping, spending time, spending money. In the middle, it's got courage and permission and fear and guilt and, doubt and, this psychological battleground that you'll go through when you have to decide how you're going to spend your money and how you're going to spend your time. And the reason why I think it is a skill is because on the opposite side, we've been taught the skill of saving, right? So for 40 years, we've been conditioned to save and not spend. I think, people have been taught the skill of saving more over the last 20 years or so when auto-enrolment in the UK and, we're told, we're kind of forced to save effectively. But I think about the influence of family, parents, grandparents, friends, colleagues, HR departments, whatever this might be, save for a rainy day. And we've been conditioned to think, again, going back to the numbers will make us feel safe. That saving journey, the discipline of saving has brought a whole host of emotions with it. I'm saving for my future. I'm, that's giving me a security blanket, et cetera, as you build it up. And then there's a moment in time that we are told to flick the switch, to flip the script and go, oh, by the way, everything that you've done over the last 40 years, you've now got to do the opposite, right? That security that you've built up, everything that's everyone has ever told you, all your learnt behaviours, all the observations you've had is now a load of rubbish, Mr. Brain. Now you've got to enjoy depleting that money. I kind of say this is a bit like spending 30 or 40 years building the most beautiful sand castle you can ever build, massive thing, and then being told one day you've got to knock it all down and have joy and happiness and everything doing it, right? You're going to feel quite sad. You might only knock a quarter of it down to start with because you want to keep looking at the thing that you spent a lot of time building. So it's really difficult, right? And so to learn the skill of spending, this is about learning to be intentional. It's about values. This is about ensuring that your money is aligned with your values, that you can create meaning, memories and moments with it, right? And I think that's the biggest thing when people try and transition into this. I try and educate people about what will make them happy, right? I'm not here to tell them how to be happy, but we do know that if you spend your money on experiences and memories with and on people that you love, then it's going to be a wonderful way of spending your money. If you're intentionally trying to spend that money with courage, because, I think the big thing there is when there's no more paycheck coming in, this regular income that you get, it's terrifying, even for people that know they've got enough. Because again, if you think about the psychology of this, paycheck anxiety is a real thing. I've worked with people that have said, oh, don't worry, Dan, we're great spenders. We'll be able to spend our money. I'm like, no. You can spend income that's being replaced next month by more salary. That's a very different thing than actually spending money that's never going to be replaced again. And how many times, Pete, have we had it where people go, look after this for us, please, because that's all I've now got.
Yeah.
Right. That is kind of, this is it, right? There's no more. Nothing else is coming in. So this is all I've got. So this is about, as I said, the courage of unwinding those beliefs, the courage to intentionally deplete the money, the courage to realise that every bit of work that you've done over the last 30 or 40 years has been to give you the freedom to make sure that you can live the life that you want to live. And if you are shackled to be able to do it, then you've just wasted 30 years of your life, right? Yep. And so, Preach. People need a plan. They need guardrails. They need some kind of behavioural nudging and, dare I say it, coaching to give them the confidence to align their money with their values, to understand that spending isn't reckless, it's absolutely needed. This is what you've designed this moment for. And I think it's one of the biggest, one of the biggest impacts that we have on our clients. Helping them spend their money with freedom is such a huge thing, because I don't think they'd do it without us. And actually, what's coming about is they're not, right? So the stats that are coming out now over 20, 30, 40-year retirements with defined contribution pensions, i.e. pots of money, is suggesting that people aren't spending it. They're dying, with 60%, 70% of their starting net wealth still on the table. They're not drawing down their capital. They're drawing less because they're afraid of running out of money. And so they end up not using it and dying with. I think the key thing for me is you don't leave money on the table, Pete. You leave memories and experiences, right? You get to that point where you kind of go, well, gee, I could have done this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right. I quite agree. I could listen to you talk forever. You have a real knack of a turn of phrase around this stuff, which is obviously resonating, which is why the podcast is doing well, all that sort of stuff. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to ask you another impossible question. Somebody's sort of listening to this and they're approaching retirement. Where would they start? What piece of advice would you give them? What should they be starting to think about?
Yeah, there's a phrase. I sketched this the other day. I said something out loud, and I thought, oh my God, I've said something quite good, and I thought I'd sketch it. I think people need to stop focusing on what they're running from and focus about what they're being pulled towards. And people have said this, like focus on what you're retiring to, not what you're retiring from. So it's a similar thing, right? But at this stage of life, I honestly think that don't run from something, be pulled towards something. What is calling you? What is the things that you want to do when you have ultimate control, or more control over your time? And actually, if you're thinking about retiring in the next 2 or 3 years, start building those things in now. Don't wait to do it. And I say you need to retire with stuff as well. So there's a retire from, with, and to, and build stuff in now that you can take with you into this next phase of life. So that would be, I think, one of my biggest takeaways for people. What's pulling you towards, what you're being pulled towards, because the best retirements, they're not created by chance. They're designed with intention. It's artistic, and so I think that would be the number one piece of advice.
Love that, Dan. When my publisher asked me to write the book that came out earlier this year, the retirement book, right? My initial thought was I'd love to write about the behavioural, the human side of retirement. I'm really glad I didn't, because I would have made a significantly worse job in compared to what you've done, man. I think this is an absolute masterclass in getting to what's really important in retirement. And I'm not blowing smoke up your here, man. I think you've done an outstanding job with this book. So, yeah, I'm really glad I didn't try, because I wouldn't have done half as good a job as you have. So, look, where can people find out about what you're up to, man? Because you've got a few things going on. Yeah,
so I said connect with me on LinkedIn. That's I'm not a social media person. I try and stay off social media as much as I can, but LinkedIn's the one place you will absolutely find me. So the podcast, Humans versus Retirement podcast, which is my little baby now. So I really enjoy doing that. Connect to that's on all podcast platforms. And then the Retirement You Didn't See Coming, the book, that's available on Amazon in the UK. I self-published it, so it's a bit tricky to understand the feeds and where it goes. But then you either buy it on Amazon, or there's the Great British Book Store, which is international, and it's all on there, or via my website, Humans versus Retirement.
Brilliant. We'll get some links up, man.
Yeah.
We'll make sure there's links in the show notes.
Thank you,
Dan. I've really, really enjoyed this, bud. Congrats again on a great piece of work, and keep doing what you're doing, man. It's important work. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, P. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dan, and I loved chatting to him. He's a real kindred spirit. Honestly, I can't recommend that book highly enough, you probably gathered that from the conversation, but definitely pick one up if you have a chance. There's links to the book and all the rest of the stuff we talked about at the show notes, meaningfulmoney.tv/session597. Next time, we're back to the Q&A with my glamorous co-host, Mr. Roger Weeks, who you can now see in all his glory. Thanks to the fact that we're now doing these on YouTube as well. But thanks for listening and watching to this one. I'll talk to you next time.